Hello everyone, welcome to another Artist Loft drawing class. I'm your instructor Adrienne Hodge, and I am so happy to be partnered with Michaels to bring you this ongoing drawing series, which will be continuing on for another year. So if you've been enjoying them so far, just keep coming back. We'll be here Wednesday evenings at 6 with free and premium classes. We have this class tonight, which is free. It's part 1 of 2 in a class on pet portraits using pen and ink. And then after this class, we'll have a premium class on drawing noses coming up later this month. And I believe Jimena can drop the link to that class. And if you're watching this recording later on YouTube, you can just search on the Michaels website for drawing realistic noses using inverted light, I believe is the name of that class. And that one's coming up on April 20th. And so yeah, and then we'll have 2 premium classes per month typically. And right now those premium classes are focused on portrait drawing. So we've been breaking down different facial features. So far we've done the eyes, the lips, and then the nose class is coming up, and then I'll have a class where we're contouring the entire face in May. So make sure you sign up for those premium classes, because those classes will not be posted for free on YouTube later. The links to those classes will only be sent to students who registered for those premium classes. I'm going to go ahead and switch over to my tabletop view and talk about the supplies and what we've got going on tonight. So we're going to be drawing from a reference photo of a furry friend of mine. It's not my pet, it's my friend Carrie's Chihuahua named Biscuit. And that was the photograph of Biscuit that I put on the supply list, and I believe you should have access to a couple other versions of that photograph. So this will be a little preview of the drawing noses class using inverted light, because I'll be using an inverted light photograph tonight as well. So basically I'm just inverting the light. All the lights are dark and all the darks are light in the photograph. And then I also made it black and white. So you should have links to those reference photos in the supply list. And if you are working from your own photograph, then I just suggested that you use a photograph that is similar to this, in that it's nice and crisp and clear. Lots of details are visible. And so it's close up on your pet's face, so we can really just hone in on all those nice details. And there's a lot of natural light. So if your photograph is of your pet and it's been cropped from a photo where the pet was kind of smaller in the image and you had to zoom in, and it might be kind of grainy, it might not have those details. So make sure, even if you have to sacrifice quality of photograph for maybe content in the photograph, I would do that, because you're going to be better off drawing if you've got something zoomed in, lots of detail, lots of natural light, like this image. And my friend Carrie, whose dog this is, was even saying that this was going to be challenging because Biscuit has white fur and that it's hard to draw. And I know I used to have a black cat, and whenever I would draw my black cat, it would be challenging as well. But when you take if the photo has lots of natural light like this and you invert it, you can see there actually is a lot of variation on the light on Biscuit's fur. So it really comes down to light. If you've got a picture of a black cat in very low light, then it's going to be much harder, etc. Okay, so that's my final drawing, which is something we should have something similar to this by the end of class 2. But by the end of class tonight, our goal is to have something that looks like this. So sort of a mapped out drawing of the light in the photograph and all of those value shapes. And we're sort of capturing everything that we're going to add the pen and ink to next week. And we might get started adding some pen and ink tonight. We'll see how far we can get. I'd like to try to do that if we can, but if we just get to this point, we should be in pretty good shape for part 2 of the class. So the supply list was a drawing pad or sketch pad, the Artist Loft sketching pencils or drawing pencils. You're going to want a full set of, well, you really are just going to want your H pencils. I'm going to be drawing with a B pencil tonight so that you guys can see my lines, because if I were to draw my lines really light like this, it's unlikely they're going to really show up on the screen very well. So I am going to darken my lines a little bit and draw a little darker than I want you to. I would suggest you use a 2H or a 4H or a 5H, and that way you can erase your lines when you're done. You can erase your pencil lines and you can only see the pen lines, and then we'll have some really nice effect going in the places where the light is hitting the pet directly. So you'll want the sketching pencils and an eraser for tonight, and your drawing pad. And then we'll hopefully get to a little bit of the pen and ink tonight. You're going to want a set of the Artist Loft illustration pens, and I've got the set that has a 0.1, a 0.3, and a 0.5 nib pen. Okay, any questions about supplies?
None so far.
Okay, and then make sure you tag your work with those hashtags, make it with Michael's classes, and follow me on Instagram or tag me on Instagram directly. I'm at Adrienne Hodge Art. And after class tonight at about 7:05 p.m. Central Time, I'll be on Instagram for about 30 minutes doing a live Q&A, just in case there's any leftover questions from the class tonight. You can follow me over there and join me for that live Q&A. So it's at Adrienne Hodge Art on Instagram. And if you missed the Q&A tonight, I'll leave it up on my Instagram page and you can watch it later and see if people ask any questions that you might have had. And then here's some of my work on my business cards. If you fancy ethereal art using calligraphy ink, that's what I do in my personal work. Okay, so let's get started here with our mapping out this image. So we're aiming for something like that. I'm going to keep that kind of off to the side so I can refer back to it. And I'm going to start with just my main photograph here. And let me see if I can get the photograph to be on screen as well as my drawing pad. It might not quite happen because I printed the photo nice and large, but you guys should all have a copy of that. So I'm going to see if I can cut the extra paper off the side here just to make it a little smaller, make it fit on screen. I'm just curious how many of you are going to be drawing your own pets tonight. If you are, just give me a little thumbs up or pet emoji in the chat, or tell me what your pets are. I see several people are saying I'm going to try. Lois is drawing her own pet. Okay, cool. Well, I can't wait to see them. This is, if you've ever attended a paint and sip establishment for a pet portrait night, this is very similar to the process that would be used at a a traditional pet portrait class. At a paint and sip establishment, what they do is, because I've worked at those, and I'll just give you a little insider secret here, what we do is you send in your photograph to those places ahead of time before the pet portrait class, and the artists and art instructors will take your photograph into a dark room with a projector and project the image onto the canvas, and then just outline the value shapes for you. So then when you go to paint it, all you're having to do is match your colors and your texture and everything. And then you're just filling in something like this that's been drawn directly onto your canvas for you. And when I used to work at one of those places, we would do it in Sharpie so that it was nice and bold. So if you, struggle tonight with this process and you have you could take your sketching paper over to a window and you could put your photograph behind your sketching paper, and you could tape your paper to the window, and then it would kind of work as a light box. Do it during the day, so you've got some sunlight coming through the window, and the window would work as a light box, and then you can just trace your value shapes, all your shapes of your highlights and the shapes of your shadows onto your paper. And then next week when we add the pen and ink, it might simplify it a little bit for you. That is a very in case of emergency trick there for you, though. I'm going to show you how to draw it tonight, and we're going to draw it with Biscuit. But if you, struggle with your own photograph and the proportions are off and you want to even just kind of check yourself against, your window light box, that is something that you could do. Okay, so because I know this class was advertised for intermediate, but we might have some beginners in the group that want a little boost. And if you're more interested in the product and not the process, then there's no such thing as cheating, I say. It's all, if you're having fun and you're finding joy in the art that you made, then who cares how you got there, right? I mean, I do care, but to each his own. Okay, moving on. So I'm going to use a B pencil, but I suggest you use an H pencil so that you can make your lines nice and light and easy to erase. I'm only drawing dark so that you folks can see it on screen. So I'm just going to dive right in. I'm going to do a little refresher. I'm going to dive right in. And then I'm like, actually, let me do a little refresher on the value scale. So I'm just going to take my B pencil right here and turn it on its side and see how dark I can get with that B pencil, and then just pull up on my pressure and get a nice little value scale to happen here with just my B, and see how light I can get with that. So we're looking at our photograph and we're looking for all of the different shapes that fall into the various values on our value scale. So 10 being our absolute dark and 0 being our blank paper. So if this is a scale from 0 to 10, where the absolute highlights are in the photograph are what we're going to leave as blank paper. And in the inverted light photograph, that's everything that's showing up black in this inverted light photo is actually the part of Biscuit's fur that is absolute white. And everything that's showing up absolute white in this photograph is actually absolute black. So it's inside of the eyes is black, inside of the nose is black, inside of the mouth, and at the bottom of the nose, etc. And then we've got absolute white on the top of the head, right here above the eyebrows, or where the dog's eyebrows are, here on the cheek area, and right here on the neck. So, but we're going to leave a lot more blank paper on just because, we'd be sketching a lot of pen and ink, but basically that's where we might have, more of like a medium gray to our values here. And then we're leaving it blank paper everywhere where we're seeing the absolute black in the photograph. Any questions about just observing the light or where we're seeing the light in this particular photo? Unfortunately, I can't, help you all with your individual photographs.
There is a question about value scale. It might be for next class, but I'll go ahead and ask it.
Okay.
How would you know how to do a value scale with black pen and ink?
Okay, so I'm gonna get to that, yeah, whenever we finish filling in the the value shapes, the shapes of the shadow and the shapes of the light. I'm gonna do a really quick little tutorial on the shading techniques, but if you want to get a head start on next week, you can check out all of the classes that we've had so far on the value shading techniques. So there's hatching. I'll just write it on my paper here. Hatching, cross hatching. I'm going to review all of these at the beginning of the next class, or at tonight at the end of the class if there's time. Stippling and scribbling. And I had an entire class on hatching and cross hatching and an entire class on stippling and scribbling back in August, I believe. And we also had several classes on tonal shading, and we've done a lot of tonal shading throughout this series. And we've done a couple of classes with the pen and ink where we did hatching, cross hatching, stippling, and scribbling. And I've brought it up multiple times, but if you just search on YouTube for Artist Loft, hatching, cross hatching, Artist Loft, stippling, and scribbling, you'll find those classes, and those will walk you through those shading techniques. And with the pens, you can only use those shading techniques. So hatching is the one directional lines like you're seeing here. They follow the contours of the form. Stippling are the little dots. Cross hatching would be they go multiple directions, although I didn't use any cross hatching on Biscuit here. And I didn't use any scribbling. Well, maybe a little bit in like the implied line areas, but mostly I used hatching, and then I used some stippling on the nose because the nose actually looks stippled in the texture there. So it made sense to use some stippling. So looking at your fur on your pet, you might find that scribbling makes the most sense, or hatching, cross hatching. It just depends on the texture of the fur. Like if you were drawing a labradoodle, I would think, or a poodle, that scribbling would probably make the most sense for that fur. Okay, well, I don't want to get too far ahead of myself though. So we're just looking at the value shapes right now, and we're just gonna dive in and just try our best here because I don't have, you know, all the time in the world to break down how to, you know, draw just basic forms, but we've had plenty of classes on that. Our very first class would be a great one to refer back to, Introduction to Graphite and Drawing Forms, if you're struggling to just make a three-dimensional you know, sphere. Like the eyeball is a sphere, the nose is very spherical on Biscuit, and then the head is very spherical. So we need our we need to have a sense and understanding of how this is a form that is spherical, that is rounded. So we need to make sure that these value shapes that we're drawing are following the contours of the form. So I'm just gonna like sketch Biscuit's head just as one big shape here. And you can break it down to multiple shapes. Like maybe I'm seeing a cube right here on the mouth part and the nose. It feels a little like I might actually do more of a square right here to get started. I'm gonna actually go to a new blank page so I don't have all these notes on my paper. I should have been using my sketch paper. I'm running low on paper in my drawing pad. The drawing paper is a little thicker. Okay, so we're gonna go general to specific here. And you might want to sketch off to the side if you're, just struggling to get the basic form to happen. But maybe we'll start with a square right there, and then a circle coming off of that. So we're being very general here about the forms. And then the ear is another rectangular shape, but it's a little more of like a quadrilateral, if that's the right word. Okay, so I've got the ear coming off of a big circle and then more of a square right here, but then the square is rounded at the bottom. So those are the main big shapes that I'm seeing on Biscuit's head. And then the neck is coming out of the ears, and it's maybe cone shaped, but the cone is or cylindrical shape. So we've got a cylinder. So on a cylinder, we need to have an understanding that there's a curve, right? There's a curve all along the contours of the neck. I'm just going to really push the contours that I'm seeing here for a second, just so that you can see, like, the whole head is going to be on a curve. So we need to have that understanding of contours. So curved that direction, and then following the sides of the neck and sort of radiating up like this. We had a class on drawing coffee mugs that would really apply to the cylinder that we're seeing on that neck. Okay, I'm not going to do that all over the portrait. I just wanted to do that a little bit so that you could see what I mean about the first shapes that we've got going. And then now I'm going to adjust this so I can get the eye shape in there. So going very general, and then we'll get more specific with our shapes. We've got a big, not a full circle, it's sort of shaped like a gumdrop right here. And then the nose, let's see. You guys are always so good at helping me identify what else shapes could be. So instead of calling this a nose, what like basic shape are we seeing here? I'm seeing a heart shape, but then it's got like a flat line across the top. So maybe we could draw a heart shape. If anybody's seeing something else that might help, that would be nice to drop in the chat, but maybe a heart shape and then it's flat across the top. That might get us there. And
We
then,
have a mushroom slice.
ooh, I love it. Yes, a mushroom slice, totally. Or maybe a spade. Okay, and then the nostrils, let's do that same thing. I'm seeing a comma. Who else is seeing a comma? Right? A comma on its side. We can adjust, if you're using an H pencil, you should be able to adjust the placement of these shapes. So if you draw the comma shape on there and it's not quite right, and you're using an H pencil, it should be easy to erase. I'm using a much darker pencil just so you guys can see my lines, but hopefully you're going nice and light so you can adjust where you're putting these things. I'm seeing the letter C right here with maybe like a letter R or a B, sort of a B, like the letter B right there. And then we've got this line. If you were in the premium class where I was talking about drawing lips recently, and also in the eye class, I talked about, this game that I like to use when I'm drawing pretty much anything, but especially faces. I try not to have lines if I can help it. I try to have shapes. So like rather than putting just one line right here, let's outline the shape that we're seeing. So even though there's like this cleft going through the center of the nose, rather than just drawing one line right there, I'm looking for a double-sided shape. And then there's even more of a shape if I look at the mid-tone on the value scale. So like the 5, 6, 7s that I'm seeing right here are creating this very organic shape. Maybe like a little Christmas tree shape on either side. Yeah. And then let's, before we get too far, I'm gonna go ahead and put this other eye in because I don't wanna put it in the wrong place. So we've got a very big dopey eye happening right here. And a way you can check yourself to see if the eye is kind of placed in the right spot on the head is to use the negative space between the eye and the side of the head on your pet, or maybe where the ear is, and do a bit of a visual measurement. Like, I feel like it's in the right spot right here from the top of the head, but I have a lot of distance between here and where the ear starts. But that's not true because the ear actually starts on the head right here. So that looks about right. All right, but now let's observe the eye shape. We did kind of a big circle, but let's look at the shape. And since eyes are one of those things that we have a, you know, stock reference photo of in our brains, and it's hard to get away from our imagined idea of an eye, that's where the inverted light can come in so handy. And a lot of the nose was kind of washed out in the inverted light, which is why I didn't pull it out for the nose. But on the eye right here, like, we can really zoom in on that and just ignore, oh, sorry, I just bumped my camera. Ignore the knowledge that it's an eye, and like, what else are you seeing in there? What other shape, you know, could that be? I'm seeing kind of a teardrop shape, even though that is associated with an eye. But if I looked at it this way, it's the shape of a teardrop. And then I can see the reflection of the window when this photograph was taken. And then I've got a little half circle right here. So rather than trying to draw a big circle for the eye, oh, somebody said lemon. I love that. Yes, it's like a lemon. Okay, so let's draw a lemon shape with a little half circle shape and then that window. But notice how the window is following the contours. It's not a, you know, straight rectangle. It's a curved rectangle. It's got a little curve to it. So make sure you kind of curve it a little bit. So first I'm going to sketch my lemon shape. So I saw somebody ask, how do we start ours? Like, if you're not drawing Biscuit with me and you're drawing your own pet, I want you to look at your photograph and do the same thing I did to start. Break it down into the big general shapes. So I started with a square, a kind of angled, like a quadrilateral shape for the ear, a circle, and a cylinder. That's all I started with, right? And then I started looking at the nose, and then I'm breaking down the nose into shapes, breaking down the eye into shapes. So we're just looking for the various shapes that we're seeing within our pet. And just, you know, follow along as far as you can. Do that as much as you can. And if at the end of the class it looks totally off and you don't like it, then you can do the window trick that I told you about. But just stick with it for now. Try not to put too much pressure or expectation on yourself for this to be perfect. Okay, so remember, instead of trying to draw this tear duct and everything, I'm just drawing a little half circle, even though I did kind of already start to draw the tear duct. But I got my little half circle, it's kind of like a crescent moon shape. And then I've got my window, which follows the contours of the eye, that curve. And you can even see like a little bit of like her plants in the window, or like a bush outside of the window obscuring the bottom of the window a little bit. Okay, so that was all the shapes that I'm seeing in the inverted light. But if I look at the photograph itself, or even the black and white photo, if the color is distracting to you and you just want to look at the black and white photo instead, then I can start to break it down to the more specific shapes that I'm seeing on the eye. So we've got a double-sided line, and maybe if you outline the shapes on the photograph itself, that can be very helpful. If you have a red pen or another color pen or pencil, that might be helpful to outline these various shapes that you're seeing. So I'm seeing a double-sided line, not a line, but a double-sided shape here on the bottom lid. And then I can see that it is darker in the center where that pupil is. And then I see some lighter brown there. And then the rest of this, I'm just gonna kind of leave it because it is gonna end up being, I think when I used my pen, I made that all pretty solid black there. I just got the window shape, and then eventually, I think I started out pretty slow with my, oh, that's where I used cross hatching actually. I used cross hatching on the eye. So I'm gonna go ahead and just fill in with pencil now, since this is all gonna end up pretty solid black, and you can do this too. Start to do some cross hatching on the where it's going to all end up black here. So I have a curved line and it kind of switches at a certain point. So here it's almost like an equator line, and then it curves down this part of the eye, it curves up here, and then in this direction it's a curved vertical line, and then same thing at the center, it becomes almost straight, and then it curves out in the other direction. And if that went too fast, that'd be another class where I broke that down very slowly, was the perspective of a coffee mug class, where I talk about, just perspective on something that's cylindrical or rounded like the coffee mug, but that's similar to what's happening right there on the eye. So yeah, you can put your cross-hatching contours in now, and that'll help you see the 3 dimensions of the eye. And we can do the same thing on the other one, but let's draw a few more shapes on the other eye to outline that one a little better. And also this is a good time to see like how big the eye is. So I drew that nice and big because the eyelid that fur above the eyelid is still pretty rounded, but the eyeball itself is pretty in line with this eyeball. So I can do kind of a line here. And you might do this as well to your photograph to help you if you're really struggling with proportions. You can kind of break it down to, outline these shapes. Like here's my square. I'm just going to draw all over the photo. And here's my circle. And here's my cylinder. That might make it a little easier to see. And then here's the rounded contours on the neck. These are curved here. I can always print this photo again so I have one that doesn't look like this next week, or maybe this is just helpful. I think it's helpful. Just take your pencil and just notice where those curves are happening. And there's a lot of dips and curves happening on the side of the face right here, but we're going to try to focus on the value shapes first, and then notice the contours next, because I don't want to lose anybody. But I didn't outline this one, so I'll outline that one as well. And then within the ear, we could do the same thing. There's kind of a Oh, what can we call that shape? You can also turn your photograph upside down so that you can see these shapes a little easier and outline them with the photo turned upside down, or take it over to the window and outline them just to get an idea of where the shapes are, but then go back and try to draw them if you want to challenge yourself. If you're just really having a hard time seeing the shapes of shadows and the shapes of light in your photograph. Trapezoid, somebody said right there. Okay, but going back to this eye, so I want to make sure that my eyeballs are in line with each other, and they are. And then within that shape that I've got, that gumdrop shape that I initially drew, I've got a couple of overlapping circles here within the eyeball, but I've also got this little shape right here of fur that's going in front of the eye, and I want to make sure that I put that in. So it's kind of like a little whisker shape to it like that. I'm just going to do like that, and then the bridge of the nose is actually right there as well. So I'll put that in, and I can actually see a little bit of the other window reflected, or the same window maybe reflected over there. See how I put that in? So again, you want it to be a little curved. And then you can put these circles in for the eyeballs, but we're gonna end up making it pretty solid black with our pen, except for the window reflection. So however you want to sketch it right now is fine by me, but I think doing the hatching and cross hatching across the eyeball so that you get a sense of how rounded that is. And proportions really matter when it comes to pets, you guys. I didn't want to say this early on because I didn't want to put any like weird pressure on anybody, but I'll say it now that we're getting to the part where we're making things a little more specific. I've taught a lot of portrait classes over the years, and I often will have people who think they're going to we'll be drawing human portraits, but then I always will have somebody who comes to the human portrait class with a picture of their pet because they think they're going to go a little easier on themselves and draw their pet instead of a human. And then those people end up getting more frustrated than, let's say, because I always tell people in a beginner portrait class to bring in a photograph of somebody who's not precious to them, or a photograph of themselves, because it's easier to start with a self-portrait, because then you don't have an audience that you're trying to satisfy, or this person who's precious to you that you're trying to capture. All of us are pretty good at making ourselves look bad at a certain point, but we want to make our partner or our grandparent or our grandchild look like them in the painting, right? So people will be like, oh, I'm going to paint my pet or draw my pet instead. And then it's like, okay, but your pet is very precious to you, and your pet has just as much character and personality and little idiosyncrasies to their face, that if the proportions are off, you're not going to capture the likeness of your pet, and you're going to be, just as frustrated. So I don't know. I'm just saying that just because, yeah, drawing a pet is not like a loophole in the portrait drawing learning curve. You're still, you're still going to probably want to capture likeness if you're drawing your own pet. So that's why drawing my friend's pet, Biscuit, is a good place to start, because you don't know Biscuit, right? If it just looks like a Chihuahua in the final piece here, you'll probably be fairly satisfied. But if you're trying to draw your own pet and you're not capturing the likeness of your own pet, you're likely to be more disappointed. So anyway, just a little aside there. Okay, so we've got basically the eyes, but we don't have anything around the eyes. So we want to get I'm going to go to my inverted light photo here to just break down all the rest of these shapes. So we're looking for this shape here, which is very organic. I don't know what to call that other than maybe a triangular shape right here. And then this is, again, another very irregular shape, but we're just trying to get as close as we can to the irregular shapes. And then we've got this darker shadow in the middle here. And then on the other side of that, we've got this fur that really radiates out around the tear duct. So it follows the contours of the eye here. So I want to make sure I'm really following this curve, this kind of spiral of fur right here. Maybe it could be like a broom or a wave. It's organic, but it's also, you could even just go ahead and start to put the hatching lines in and just really notice what those whiskers and fur are doing right there. And then above the eye, we've got the same thing, hugging that curved shape of the eye. Not worrying about any of the details of the whiskers too much here. We're just getting the overall shape of shadow and shape of light that we're seeing around it. Got a little triangle shape here. Okay, what else? Let's move on to the mouth. So on the mouth, I've got where it's absolute black is very obscured by the light of the light whiskers that are overlapping right here. So I want to be careful not to like make it too big because I want to leave a lot of blank paper for the light whiskers to seemingly go on top of the mouth right there. But at the front of the mouth, the center of the mouth under the nose is where I've got a darker shape. So right underneath that little line that we drew, we've got a triangular shape right here. And then we'll just leave this pretty thin for now. And then over here underneath the eye, I can line up the pupil with it. I should be able to draw a straight line and almost hit the corner of the mouth there. So if I draw a straight line from the center of the mouth, then I can get my little corner of the mouth right there in line with the pupil. And then I'm going to go ahead and put a big shape in here for all the whisker area, and then look for smaller shapes of shadows within that. And I'm going to follow the contours of the form as I sketch those in. And on my original sketch, I left that pretty blank because I just trusted myself to, be able to follow those contours when I get there. And since it is pretty light, if you want to do the same thing, but just, leave that area pretty blank, but just, make a mental note of what the value is going to do when it gets there, that would be good. Really, we just want to outline all these areas where it's going to get dark, because if it's going to be light, that's going to be the blank paper, right? And even the areas that are going to get solid dark, we can leave those blank as well. I'm just filling some of those in to help you all to see them. Okay, things are looking a little stiff on my drawing, so I want to try to soften some of these hard edges that I've created. So I'm just going to erase some of these hard lines that I drew now that everybody's got a pretty good idea of, you know, what the general shapes were. So I want to try to get it a little more organic feeling before the end of class. And you might do the same. So I'm looking at the softer edges that I'm seeing. And maybe I want to leave those, you know, kind of unfinished too, because when I go to add the pen, it'll be nice to, you know, have the pen kind of disappear into the blank paper right there. And if I was drawing with a lighter pencil, this, you know, wouldn't feel so hard edged, but it does. So, but I just want to give the sense of a nice soft edge there. And then with the neck, I've got that big shadow on the neck here. I saw somebody asked, how do you do an inverted light photo of their photograph? There's a number of apps. There's an app that I use that's called Phonto, Phonto. And it's an app for putting text on photos, but they have a option to invert the photograph. You could also do it in Photoshop if you're good with Photoshop, or if you know of another app, you can drop it in the chat that makes an inverted light photo. If you have an iPhone, you can invert all the light on your iPhone by just pressing the home button 3 times. At least that's what it is on my iPhone 7. When I taught high school a few years ago, my high school students taught me how to do that. I was not aware that you could do that, but you can invert everything. So you could just invert the whole photo and then, you know, print from your phone if you have a printer hooked up to your phone. Okay, so I'm just softening all these lines because I had these very hard edges and I want to get rid of those. So I'm just leaving it, it's the same shape, but I'm just leaving it nice and soft because it's so light on Biscuit here. We don't need to force a hard outline. And if you've been drawing with an H pencil this whole time, then your lines should be nice and light anyway. Mine are only darker because I wanted you to be able to see them. The other thing I want you to be aware of is the pressure that you're putting on your pencil. When we start to add our pen and ink, we want to be aware of our pressure as well. So less pressure in those lighter values, more pressure in the darker values. Or you can use the same light pressure across the whole thing because we're just going to hopefully, you know, erase all our lines when we're done anyway. Okay, well, I think that is a pretty good value shape rendering of Biscuit again to start from. I'll probably just erase some of these unnecessary lines that I drew on here now that were kind of just there as a guide, so that I can make it easier for myself to add the pen and ink. And we've got about 9 minutes until the end of class here, so I can talk a little bit about the shading techniques before we go. So I'm just going to grab one of my illustration pens. I've got the 0.5, and then I really would recommend that you go check out, if you don't know anything about the shading techniques, check out those videos on stippling, scribbling, cross hatching, and hatching from August in this Artist Loft drawing series. But basically you can do a full value scale from 0 to 10, but using these to practice using these shading techniques. So stippling is a series of dots, and they're very concentrated dots. The more we overlap them, the darker our value is going to be. And if we overlap them until we get to a solid black, that's how we would fill in our solid black using stippling. It takes a lot of patience and a lot of time to get that to happen. I'm using the thickest nib pen in the set, the 0.5, but if you were using the 0.1, it would take even longer to get to a solid black. And then a medium tone would be where they're spaced out evenly. And then a lighter value would be where they're spaced out a lot. So this is just my very brief little tutorial on stippling here. Hatching is going to be one directional lines. So those can be, they're going to follow the contours of the form. And in this case, they're following the contours of the fur. So if we've got some whiskers that are hugging the side of the eye, which is what we're going to have a lot of whiskers using hatching next week, we want to make them follow those contours. They're overlapping where they're solid black, and then we want to let them get more spaced out and less pressure on our pen and become kind of wispy and more implied. So I definitely want you to practice these shading techniques using the pens if you've never done these shading techniques with the pens before. If you expect to, you know, add this pen and ink having never drawn with pen and ink before, you want to at least give yourself a little bit of practice time, maybe even just 20 minutes if you can between now and next week. You could even draw on top of one of your photographs a little bit to see like which shading techniques make the most sense. In the eye, we used some cross hatching today, so you could practice on a sphere. And I saw Jimena just dropped a reminder that you can view the recording of this class tomorrow on YouTube. So you can always watch it again and slow things down and pause it. But for the eye, we did some cross hatching. But the eye, the way that we're viewing it in this photograph, this would be a sphere that we're looking down on and everything is curved down. But the eye in this photograph is the viewer taking the photograph is in line with the eye. So we've actually got this like equator line happening in the middle where it's like almost kind of straight in the middle and then it's curving up. Just the perspective on this eye is a little different because it's so zoomed in right on that eye. It kind of has an equator in the center and then radiates out from that. So we're actually looking at something that feels more like that. But the cross hatching is overlapping to get to a solid black. So just overlapping those lines. And even though it ends up a solid black, having those lines follow the perspective, like what we're seeing in the eyeball in this photograph, makes such a huge difference. It just gives it a certain, you know, believability for the viewer and the optical illusion of drawing an eyeball here. Okay, so we've got hatching, cross hatching, stippling, and then scribbling is the most free-form one. We're basically just scribbling or making a random mark. We are overlapping in the spots where you're getting a solid black, letting up on your pressure and letting it be more spaced out for the lighter values. But essentially what we've just created in this first part of this class right now is we've made like a paint by numbers for value shapes. Within our little empty value shape drawing that we've just done, we can break it down to the value scale from 0 to 10. And so everywhere where we're seeing a 10 on the value scale in absolute black, we're going to fill in that shape with our hatching, cross hatching, stippling, scribbling, whichever shading technique we decide to use until we get to a solid black. If we've got a medium tone, we're going to fill in our hatching until we get to a medium value. So we're just filling in these shapes that we created using our shading techniques and according to the light or dark on the value scale. And next week, I'll, take my time and review those shading techniques at the start of the class. We'll practice adding them off to the side of part of, our sketch, just to get comfortable with the pens, and then we'll start to fill that in on the drawing. And if you really struggled with proportions, you can do that window trick that I talked about. And if you have any leftover questions, you can join me on Instagram at Adrienne Hodge Art in just a moment, and I'll have that little Q&A. But I'd love to see some of y'all's sketches. So if you want to share, just hold them up to your screen and Jimena can spotlight you. Hopefully you drew nice and light. And so might have to hold it up super close so we can see them.
So here's Sarah.
Ooh, look at that. Yes.
Then we have Lexi. And then James.
Oh, I love all those different values there. Yes. Oh, I'm excited about that.
Christina.
Oh, wow. Look at that tonal shading you've already added. Man, you might want to do a couple of different ones with graphite and pen and ink. That looks so nice with the graphite. Oh, very nice.
So Carol.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I love all those value shapes. That's looking so good. Yeah, and you don't even have to fill in the value yet if you don't want to. You can just leave it blank and, we'll do it all with the pen. But oh, that's so good.
And
really nice. You captured an expression there on that one.
That's Marty right there.
Oh, look at that. Yeah, that one's very strong as a graphite drawing as well. But if you want to draw it again and leave it empty for the pen and ink, so you don't have to cover up all that lovely graphite work. So good.
Madeline.
Oh, wow. You got some color going in there too. Very nice.
And Lois.
Oh, I love how nice and light you went. I can tell you've got lots of other shapes there, but they're so light we can't see them yet. Very nice.
Keisha.
Oh, I love how you printed. Yeah, you've got the inverted light, a black and white, and a color version. That is so strong. That's looking so good.
We have Joe.
Oh, look at Biscuit. That's looking great.
And,
oh,
sorry, go ahead.
Looks almost just like mine.
There you go. Anjo. Anjo, can you hold it up? There you go.
Oh, you already started adding your pen and ink, and that is gorgeous. Oh, you don't even need me. You're doing wonderful. But come back next week so we can see it finished.
It's Patty.
Oh, there's the pen. It's looking so good.
And we have Susan.
Look at that expression. That's looking really good. All right, well, it is 7:01, so we'll go ahead and stop there. But if you guys have any other questions, I saw somebody ask, how do you do a pitch black dog? Come join me on Instagram and I'll talk more about any lingering questions you might have in that Q&A. And hopefully I'll see you next week for part 2 of this class. Good job, everyone. Thank you. Good night.
Bye.